Previously on agentpalmer.com, Mexico Set expands Berlin Games outcome to set up London match, 9 holes with the legend of Bagger Vance, and I'm still holding on to the hope I spoke about at the end of the last episode. This is the Palmer Files, episode 31 with Andy Spiteri, editor-in-chief of Zelda Dungeon and host of the Champions Cast, Omega Metroid, and Virtual Theater, who joins me to discuss video games, why we like them, why they are important, how things have changed, and much, much more. Are you ready? Let's do the show. Hello and welcome to the Palmer Files. I'm your host, Jason Stershik, also known as Agent Palmer, and on this 31st episode is Andy Spiteri, whose passion projects make him the perfect guest to discuss video games with, as he is editor-in-chief of Zelda Dungeon and host of the Champions Cast, which is the Zelda Dungeon podcast, Omega Metroid, a Metroid podcast, and Virtual Theater, a video game movie podcast. Our connection is Diamond Dave Meyer, who, with Andy and others, started a podcast that then led to Dave's one-time podcast empire, and it's where Andy got his start to get him behind the mic, where he now resides on 3 different shows. But at the core of those 3 shows is video games, and that is what the episode is about. We discuss a lot of things, but most precious to me about this episode is that Andy takes my side in an ongoing discussion about Skies of Arcadia, and if podcasts aren't about finding people to say you're correct in feuds with your personal friends, then what are they for? All kidding aside, it's not like I expected Andy to say those things, and it was fun to have someone else voice my side in a better way than I have. But that's just one area where video games overlap with every other entertainment medium. While we can all see what the objective is, or what the objectives are, we don't have to agree on how to get there. And with video games, we can get there in different ways. They can also bring us together because while my friend Chris Hughes may not agree with my Skies of Arcadia love, we did team up in college to win a Super Smash Bros. Tournament, so clearly we're still on the same team. Before we get to it, remember that if you want to discuss this episode as you listen or after, you can tweet me at Agent Palmer, you can tweet the show at The Palmer Files, or Andy at Spiteri316, that's at SPITERI 316. You can hear him on the Champions Cast, Omega Metroid, and Virtual Theater on your podcast app of choice, and you can check out ZeldaDungeon.net for all your Zelda needs. Email can be sent to the show at thepalmerfiles@gmail.com, and don't forget you can see all of my writings and rantings on agentpalmer.com. So without further ado, let's press play. Andy, why do you like video games? Let's just start out there.
Oh man, that's a loaded question that you can go in a lot of different directions with. Okay, to take it way back when, I think everyone's answer would be that they like video games because they're fun. And they, as a kid, like when I was a kid, I would sit down and play Super Mario World, and I was like, yeah, this is really fun. This is great. I'm bouncing around as this little plumber dude. I'm getting some coins. I'm fighting Koopa. This is fun. And that answer, as I grew up, evolved into I like them because they are an escape from the real world. You can be anything in a video game. You can be the hero saving the world. You can be a master thief, you can be a race car driver, an alien, whatever you want, right? Like you could be James Bond. And that can also branch into, I like video games because, again, they keep on evolving and now they're art. Like, I mean, you go and see some of the best laid out stories of all time are taking place in video games. You look at, Final Fantasy 9 or Skies of Arcadia. Like, these are masterful stories.
You literally, that by far my favorite game of all time.
Really? Skies of Arcadia?
Love that game.
Oh, dude, that's so awesome. I don't see enough people talking about that game. It's probably like my number 2 favorite game ever. It's so good. It's so good.
I have a save on a memory card that is me. It's Vice and Ica only. I haven't beaten the first temple yet, and it was just me leveling them. And right now they're probably at level 35 or 40 themselves. Like, they're maxed out as much as they can be. Now, I maybe made a mistake because obviously you don't have all the stones and colors at that point. So it's only the 2 or 3 stones that I've got maxed out. But my point was, it was kind of like, oh, I'm listening to a podcast. I need something to do. And it was before this podcast started. So I'll just level them as much as possible. So when I eventually sit down to write a review of the game, I can just play through it, right? Like, I'm not going to have any trouble with Vice at level 45 early on.
Right.
And then, like, at a certain point, I figure, like, I'll get close enough to a point where I'll be where you are early enough to, like, the least amount of levels you can be. And that's where I'm going to start. And I'll just be able to breeze through the game, like, just having some fun, right? Especially because I've unlocked Ica's, like, multi-kill. So even, like, just traveling around, like, the random monster generator, like, I won't have any issues. And I've not gone back to the game. I just know that it's waiting there for me.
Oh, dude, you got to finish that game. It's so good. No, yeah, like, you haven't even got to, like, Fina. No.
Like, I mean, I know they're coming, right? Like, I've beaten the game 4 or 5 times. It's just I've got this one save that's going to be just for enjoying the story. That's it. Now, that particular game is a point of contention for one of my good friends who was on this show recently, Chris Hughes, Triforce Dad 1984 on Twitch. Nice plugs for friends, right? But he hates that game because you lose to the Red Giga the first time around. And he's like, this isn't what video games are about. You're supposed to always win. You're supposed to overcome anything. And I'm like, yeah, but that's the point. Sometimes you lose.
Oh, yeah, I completely disagree with that. I think that, like, that sets the story. It builds you up for, like, even spoilers to anybody that hasn't played Skies of Arcadia. But, I mean, at one point, you have an option to fight Ramirez, and Fina is begging you not to fight him. And if you do, you get your butt whooped. And then you fight him again later in the game, and you fight him again, and again, he kicks your ass. And then, like, by the final boss fight, when you finally beat him, it's like you finally are overcoming all the odds, man. I love that Skies of Arcadia does that, actually. I think that it's such good storytelling, man, because it just, like, it's kind of like you gotta build up your bad guy so that you know, it means something when you beat him finally, right?
Yeah, and it's probably because I didn't have a Dreamcast. So I got to Skies of Arcadia when the remake hit GameCube.
Me too, yeah.
And the thing about that was I got that around the same time I got Wind Waker. And they were my first console games that were kind of open world. Because you can get lost in Wind Waker for hours without bothering to move the story along. And Skies of Arcadia is kind of similar to that in that you can just wander around, fly around in your airship as a pirate. Like, why not? Just kill stuff. But it's not what I grew up with. Not to take away from where you were going, but like when I grew up, and I didn't grow up with consoles, I grew up with PC, but it was a lot of linear games. And when I finally got a GameCube and got away from like sports games, it was like there's no move left, move right. You know what I mean? Like there's no
right, yeah.
Like just go. It's like, well, you can go wherever you want. It's a different way to play games because that's life. You don't always get that linear storytelling in life.
Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons that like Metroid is a series that's near and dear to me, because like that's a series again, like you kind of really just make it what you want. Like there is a certain sequence of events that you probably should follow to get to, the end of the game, and there are some people that can beat that game in a stupid time. They beat it in like 45 minutes, but like you can also just get lost and explore the world and get sucked up in the ambiance of that. Yeah, man, I think that like Skies of Arcadia Legends for the GameCube is one of my favorite games ever. This might be blasphemous for me to say, but I think that it's like way better than Legend of Zelda Wind Waker, just in terms of its world and stuff. I think that the world that they made in Skies of Arcadia is just like, it's so good, it's so smart, there's so much to do, but it's not big for the sake of being big. It's just incredible. It's an incredible gameplay wise. It's incredible story wise, character wise. I think Vice is like one of the all time great like leads in a video game. Maybe just like in general. He's a very like inspirational dude. You were mentioning you have a save file. I have a save file on my old Nintendo GameCube memory card where it's like, you know how if you made all the right decisions and if you got all the treasure chests and if you did all the stuff, you got the title like Vice the Legend?
Yes.
So I finally got that and I was like, hell yeah, like I'm saving this and I'm never deleting this and I'm going to hold on to this to make sure that like, I don't know, in 40 years I can pop this in and be like, good job, Andy. You got to the Vice the Legend. So yeah, I love that game. It's nice to see someone else that's like, showing it some love too.
That piece of it is one of the things I love about it, is like your decision making, or even early on, like you can still it's still a fairly linear story, but like your decision making has huge impacts towards where you end up and who you are, and I don't know. I could go on, but I want to get back. So you have kind of parlayed your love of video games into like passion projects in all of the podcasts and the writing and the like, just the amount of content you put out from them. Is that like the dream job?
Oh yeah, man. Like I would love to do something like that as like a full-time thing, which maybe I'll try and work towards. I haven't seriously considered that, but I love doing it so much that maybe I should and just work towards doing that. But yeah, man, I do like a lot of writing for Zelda Dungeon. Actually, I do less writing now and more so just kind of managing the writers that we do have. But I do a lot of that. I do a lot of, like you said, content that we do the Zelda podcast, the Champions Cast, and the Metroid podcast, Omega Metroid. And those are weekly shows, so it's kind of a never-ending cycle of like, what the heck are we going to talk about this week? And like a buddy of mine and I have another kind of spin-off podcast as well called Virtual Theater, where we talk about video game movies. So not quite video games, but close. And that one's a pretty good time too, because historically those have had not a great track record. But yeah, it never feels like work. Like 3 podcasts a week is like, it definitely is a lot, and there's a lot that goes into them. But yeah, like what's that cliche? If you love what you do, then you never work a day in your life, right?
Absolutely. And I have to say, like, you're setting yourself up for the enviable position to be qualified when somebody's like, yeah, we're going to make a sports center for esports. Who should we get to host it? Be like, well, I've been talking about video games for... because we're there, and I look around at competitive e-gaming, and I go, I should have kept playing more video games. Right? Like...
I actually... So my co-host on Omega Metroid, Dakota Lasky, he is a voice caster. He's called some Overwatch before. I think he's done some Rocket League, maybe some Smash. Overwatch was his big one. So I know that he's pretty big into that scene. As awesome as I think that esports are, and I love that they're a thing, they're not really my thing, but I really like that it's getting bigger and bigger, and people are recognizing, esports is like a legitimate thing now. Like you you sell out buildings to watch people play gaming at the highest levels, and I think that that's awesome. But yeah, I've always been more of like the single player kind of immerse yourself type of gamer, go at my own pace kind of thing. I don't think I'd be very fun to watch playing video games, but yeah, no, I love that. I love that it's like this big deal now, where 20 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago, that would have been laughable.
Yeah, but it's not far from where we came. Like when you go back to, for me it was PC, but like there were only so many people, right? Like early on, I remember we had like networked computers for Quake, and that was 4 players, like because we couldn't figure out how to network 6 or 8, right? And if we did, it was diminishing returns, and where do you put all the CRTs? But like there were more than 4 people in that room, and people would gather around and watch you blow up your friends. And it's no different than if there were 3 people in a room with an NES or any of those early consoles before 64, where somebody's watching. It was just the nature of play. And I don't know. I feel like games, like I treat games as an escape, but we could always learn from them. We learned from these games, and I don't think they get enough credit for that part of it. And unfortunately, maybe the one downside of gaming is that the winning becomes bigger than the journey when you get to that point. I think that may be why I enjoy Skies of Arcadia and you enjoy the games that you've already mentioned, because we can enjoy the journey as much as or more than the end.
Yep, definitely. I mean, I think that games of, like, it depends on what kind of games you like too, right? Like when you ask, like, why do you love video games? It's just like, it's such a loaded question that you can go so many different directions on. My buddies, I mean, Dave, right? Dave,
yeah.
Diamond Dave, he enjoys video games because that's how he plays, or that's how he hangs out with his friends. Like he just moved down to Texas, and like he'll, I don't even know what they play now. Maybe Apex Legends or something like that. But anyway, so like they'll fire up that and they'll just kind of play and whatever, but they'll mostly just be chatting, and whatnot. And I know that that's true for a lot of people. They just want to hang out with buddies, and that's, playing the games is secondary. So like, their answer, why do you like video games, could be because it's the social aspect of it. And I mean, honestly, even that answer rings true for me. Like, I love video games. Like, I love The Legend of Zelda now, even more so than I did before, specifically because it's introduced me to so many dear friends that I've made through this website. And it's like, it's without video games, none of it's really possible, right? So, yeah, I mean, there's so many different answers about that question, or to that question, that you can be right with all of them.
Yeah, and there are, obviously Twitch is one aspect of this, and your website is kind of the other side, and there are ones that straddle it, but video games have become hubs for community building. Did you, I mean, you were a part of that community before you became like integral to the site. Were you an active participant in the dungeon community before you like got on the inside, or were you just like kind of one of those look? And I want to say this because it's the equivalent of people who listen to a podcast and never tell you they're listening. Lurkers are fine. No, like, I'm not judging, but like, what was your kind of, I mean, that's a big community. Where were you before you got on the inside?
I didn't really follow them a whole lot, to be honest. I followed them on Facebook. Zelda So as a really, I'll try and make this a quick little history lesson. Zelda Informer and Zelda Dungeon used to be 2 separate sites. The owner of Zelda Dungeon purchased Zelda Informer, so they merged the sites, but we still have 2 different social media wings, I guess. One is Zelda Dungeon, one is Zelda Informer, because they were already at like, one of them was at like 900,000, the other one was at 500,000, and you can't really mesh
sure.
Facebook pages.
Yeah.
So I followed Zelda Informer because it had a lot of the news all the time. I followed Zelda Dungeon because they had memes, and I followed another site called Zelda Universe. I just followed a lot of Zelda stuff, right? So, originally, back in like 2014, I saw a post that they were looking for people to join their team, and at this time, Diamond Dave, myself, and two of our friends had started this podcast called The Cool Story Show, which was an awful, awful podcast. But I was just like, hey, I'd love to join your team as a podcast host. I have this great podcast that maybe I could plug, and we could do some cross promotion. And like, this giant website that didn't need any cross promotion with this shitty podcast from four Canadian dudes. So they didn't even email me back, and I'm sure they were like, get this guy out of here. But then a couple of years later, again, I saw a posting for they were looking for writers, and this was right before Breath of the Wild was coming out. So about 3 months before Breath of the Wild, at the tail end of 2016, and I was telling you before we went on air, at that time, I had been laid off. So I was like, okay, well, I need something to do. And like, this sounds as good as anything. I'm very opinionated, so I might as well, write about my Zelda opinions. So I applied, and I sent in some writing samples and whatnot. And then, they were good enough to bring me on the team and get me going. And man, when I was there, I just like fell in love. I got to know everybody, and everybody was like so awesome. And, it was also the excitement of like Breath of the Wild coming out too, because that was such a game changer for Zelda and like for Nintendo really in general. But yeah, man, once I was in, I was hooked, but I wasn't really in a whole lot before that. Like I never used forum, or like, I shouldn't say I never use them. I haven't used forum since I was like 12 or anything like that. So I wasn't, and I was hooked when I was younger, might I add, but I never used them since then. So I was just kind of like a casual, like Facebook, follower.
So do you, I want to go back. What forums are you like? Can you say like what? Do you remember what forums?
Yeah. You betcha. Yeah, you betcha. 2002 GameCubeLand.com, run by a guy named Matthew out of California. It was this small, shitty GameCube site, but it was very fun. I would go in there all the time and chat with people, and like that was back in the day when it was like, fuck Xbox, GameCube is the best, it has all these games and stuff like that. So I would go in there and hang around there, and eventually the site got shut down because I think the owner just didn't want to pay for the site anymore, or I don't know, something. And yeah, from there I went to like GameFAQs.com, which is still around today.
I mean, GameFAQs was a lifesaver for some stuff.
Dude, so I mean, there's in every single game on every system has its own message board there. So like there is 1,000 message boards on that website. So I went to, I don't know if you remember this or not, probably not, but like back in like 2002 and 2003, GameFAQs used to have these poll of the day contests where it was like an NCAA style video game character contest.
Yeah.
And like,
no, I remember that.
You'd have like Link fighting Cloud and stuff like that. So yeah, I was like, I loved that. I went into the boards, and I was like talking about the contest, and ended up just staying there. And I don't know. Eventually I didn't go there anymore. I don't really know why, but man, I used to post all the time back in the day there.
I don't think the behavior is any different than a video game, right? Like if you go back through your history, I'm sure there are games you played religiously that all of a sudden you didn't. And it's not necessarily because a new one came out. Life happens and you get out of rhythm, and then like, oh, I got to finish that game. Or like, I'll just get the next one or whatever. But you've name dropped a ton of Nintendo. So I do need to ask, like, is it your console of choice? And do you cross pollinate? Like, do you have, or have you had an Xbox or a PlayStation?
Well, Nintendo is definitely my console of choice for sure. It'll always be my console of choice. Um, it took a long time, but eventually when I got my GameCube, and I was just like, okay, this is awesome, but I needed a DVD player as well, and because everything was starting to go to DVDs, so I was like, okay, well, it's time to buy a PlayStation. So I bought a PS2, and I had. There's so much good stuff on PlayStation and Xbox, and I'm a Nintendo gamer first and foremost. But like, you get PlayStation, and then I was like, okay, I'm gonna finally try this Metal Gear Solid game I've been hearing about, or I'm gonna go back and play like Final Fantasy 7 or 8 or 9, and like Final Fantasy 9 is one of my favorite games ever. So is Metal Gear Solid, and from there I skipped the PS3, but I got the Xbox 360, and I mean now I have everything. I have an Xbox, PS4, and Switch. I had 3DS, which just died an unfortunate death. Probably the only major video game console I haven't had in the last like 10 years has been the PS Vita, which wasn't really my thing.
So,
but yeah, I definitely cross pollinate, man, for sure.
So you are like Switzerland, so I can ask you this question. The console wars as we knew them of Sega versus Nintendo are gone. But now we've got this.
Oh, yeah.
Now we've got this 3-headed battle royale going on with Nintendo, Sony, and Xbox, and just from a guy who's like, I just want to play games, sitting there and watching the. Do you laugh as you see like, oh, Xbox and PlayStation waited until the last, they wanted to see who would blink before they came out with prices and specs, and like, is it hilarious? Because I'm only like a passive gamer, right? Like I got a PlayStation 2 also because I needed a DVD player, and that's the reason I got a PS3 was because like I should probably get a Blu-ray player at some point.
You need a Blu-ray player, yeah.
But like I'm not invested, right? Like I enjoy a lot of my sports simulations, but those are on any platform you want them to be. So I'm not beholden to any of them. But as someone who enjoys all of them, do you laugh? Like, is it funny? Especially when there's these people that are factions that are like, there are people on all three sides that have drank the Kool-Aid and are like, nope, it's this or nothing.
Definitely. I think to go back on what you said, actually, I think I would equate it more to, it's actually a two-headed race, and Nintendo is like kind of this tail, or like it's some other ligament or something. They're not, I wouldn't consider them like necessarily the same kind of competition as Microsoft and Sony are. I think Microsoft and Sony appeal to the same kind of gamer, and Nintendo, they put out different stuff, right? Like they put out, they don't put out the highest technology specs, machines, consoles, whatever. They have a different type of game. I think that if you were to ask most people that buy Nintendo consoles, they would say that I'm buying Nintendo consoles to play Nintendo games. Whereas I think for the PS4, PS3, Xbox 360 era, you wouldn't necessarily say like I'm buying PlayStation, or I'm buying a PlayStation to play Sony games. Like maybe you would, but I don't think it's as many people as like that would say that about Nintendo. So like, I think that like the people that are into Nintendo are like the closest to like that kind of Kool-Aid cult or whatever. And like I'm a part of that cult, so whatever. But I think that there's definitely some competition between Sony and Microsoft. I mean, you saw Microsoft buy Bethesda for like $7.5 billion yesterday, which is a huge industry-shaking move. But yeah, I mean, I feel like Nintendo and Microsoft play well together. They have, games from Microsoft available on Nintendo systems, and Microsoft characters in Smash Bros. And stuff like that. So, yeah, but I mean, like, I think that competition is good, right? Because, like, you have competition, it kind of forces everybody to up their game and to put out the best possible product that they can, and try new things. Because, like, that it's if you don't have like someone breathing down your neck for your spot, like then you get complacent, right? And you kind of saw that with Nintendo and Sega. Nintendo was complacent. Sega came up, overtook them for a little bit, so Nintendo got better. Nintendo got better, but it wasn't good enough. Sony came in and they took the throne. And then, eventually Microsoft came out and their 360 Xbox outsold the PS3. But then you had Nintendo making this weird Wii console, which is like unlike anything anyone had ever seen. So like all that competition makes for like really good, like it's really good for people like us that consume, the consoles and the games. So yeah, kind of it's part of it's kind of funny, but also it's, I like it.
Do you still go back and play classic games? I'm not even asking by console, but like classic games. Like for example, because I will come forward, right? I love the original first person shooters. So you can find me at any point now or in the future playing the original Duke Nukem 3D or the original Quake. Those two I will always have a PC that can run both of those games. Never will there not be a time that it just happens. The original Diablo, love it. Warcraft 2 Tides of Darkness, love it. These are games I make sure I have an old PC that works and still boots so I can play these. I always go back to them. Are there games from the past that you always make sure you have access to?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I've probably put 50 hours into Super Metroid this year alone. Just writing a guide about it, replaying it for Omega Metroid. Man, I love there's an app on a Nintendo Switch where it's like you can play all the old SNES games and the NES games. And I play the hell out of that. I'm actually, after we're done this, I'm probably going to go upstairs and fire up Donkey Kong Country 2, Diddy's Conquest.
Nice.
Which is such a sick game. But yeah, like actually, so one of the things that I did in 2020 was I decided that I was going to rebuild my GameCube collection because when I was 19, somebody broke into my apartment and stole all my fucking games, which was a real bummer. And I was always like, no, I'm going to get these. I'm going to rebuy all the games, but it was just so expensive. But this year I was like, nope, I'm doing it this year. So yeah, I've been playing a ton of GameCube games this year, actually. I just played like Pikmin and Pikmin 2, did a little F-Zero GX, did some Paper Mario, Thousand Year Door. Yeah, I mean, like, I love playing old games.
When they took your games, did they take the memory cards as well?
No, this was actually pretty traumatic. So like, it is really weird. So somebody busted into my apartment when I was 19, and they stole my GameCube games and my PS2 games, but they left my Wii games and my DS games. They stole my DS, but then they didn't steal my GameCube or my Wii. They stole my cousin. I was living with my cousin. They stole some of his stuff, but they did it really half-assedly. I don't know. It was weird. Not a very well-planned robbery. They didn't get full bang for their buck.
Okay. You've talked a lot about going back, especially when you broadened and went to the other consoles, but are there games from the past that you somehow have still missed that you're like, no, like there's this list I have. I'm not going to call it a bucket list because I feel like that's not, but like there's games that like, oh no, like that's one I always meant to get to that one. I'll get to that one. But like, do you have those in your head?
Yeah, definitely. There's like the early PlayStation games. I never played those because I didn't have a PlayStation. So like all the early Tomb Raiders, Crash, Spyro, I never got those. And now it's just like, do I want to play those? Like, would they hold up if I don't have those rose tinted glasses? Is this worth it? No, I mean, even on the Super Nintendo, there's a lot of really good stuff that, I really want to play that I haven't. ActRaiser, is one of them. Final Fantasy V, I had never gotten around to playing. I think that was the Japan only one. I'm sure there's more, but yeah, those ones. There's even like Kid Dracula, which is kind of this funny like Castlevania light game. I thought would be really cool. Yeah, I mean there's tons of stuff that I would love to go back and play. I might dip into the crime store actually and modify my SNES Classic and get some of those games on there and fire them up.
Do you find it? I mean, we grew up with these older consoles, but do you find it hard to go back? Because you're talking about playing a GameCube, which I haven't said it yet this entire show, and I applaud myself for that, because for me, the Wavebird was the perfect controller, and there will never be a greater controller. But those controllers, like the GameCube ones, and from PS2 on and Xbox, do you find it hard to go back to A, B, and D-pad?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Not at all, to be honest. There's something beautiful about the simplicity of the 4 buttons on the SNES controller. I don't have a problem with that at all. I know that some people have a problem with the N64 controller because it's, especially if you're going back to play like GoldenEye or Perfect Dark, because your natural instinct is to use the C stick as your dual analog camera. And to be honest, that's even been throwing me for a loop a little bit. I've been playing 3D All-Stars, Mario 3D All-Stars. But once you kind of remember, like, oh yeah, this is how it was done back then, it's not really a big thing. So no, I don't mind playing on old controllers at all. I love it, actually.
What is your favorite controller then?
Ooh, GameCube would be up there for sure. Let's see. I mean, the PlayStation controller is so solid. It's just like, there's nothing flashy about it, but the PS2 controller, which is basically the PS3 and the PS4 controller, is super solid. You know what? I'm gonna say I'll give a little asterisk here. I love the Joy-Cons because like you can just like, I laze about when I'm playing and I kind of have one arm here, one arm there, and I'm kind of doing my thing. So I love the idea of the Joy-Cons, but I think that they're terribly made because I've had to take my Joy-Cons back twice now because they've had drift, which sucks. But I love the idea of the Joy-Cons. So yeah, I don't know. It's hard to beat that GameCube controller though, man. Like that's a good controller.
Yeah,
there's a reason they still use that in Smash Bros.
Oh yeah, I mean, I haven't gone further than a Wii as far as Nintendo, and it's really just time. Like I don't have the time to play these games, so I'm not going to invest in a console. But yeah, when I invite people over to play like Kart or Smash, I'm like, oh no, I'm just going to use this old controller over here, dust this thing off.
That's the only way. Yeah, the one of the worst controllers ever was the Wii U. You definitely weren't missing much by not getting that. That was the junkiest controller Nintendo has ever made. It was this awful Fisher-Price toy that felt like it was going to break every time you hold it. You press A and you hear a rattle on the other side of the controller. Thing had like an hour of battery life. Oh, it was horrible. Horrible controller. The original Xbox controller wasn't great either.
No, I actually, through being a guy who people just give old electronics to, I have an Xbox. And I think I've played a few games on it. Like I played the original Halo because I was like, I kind of like curious, like what's this all about?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's just a first-person shooter with a plot. Okay, like I didn't buy in, but like that controller, especially coming from the GameCube and the PS2, was like, this thing's huge.
Yeah, dude, it looked like you were gonna play Whack-A-Mole. That big X in the middle is just gargantuan. Yeah, I don't know. When I first played Halo and held that controller, I was just like, what the fuck is this? This is like, I need a baseball glove to hold this thing. Like, this is insane. But I will say that I think they released a second Xbox controller that was like a little bit more compact. And then the 360 controller was awesome. That's a great controller.
When I think I know the answer to this, and it's kind of a softball, I guess, but if you were going to play a game, you have a choice. It's going to be multiplayer. You can play in the same room with up to 3 players, or you can play online with 20. I'm not specifying the game. I'm just saying like it's going to be a multiplayer game of some sort. Would you prefer to have them in the room, or is online, or does it not matter?
No, I'm an old soul, man. I like to have the people in there. Like some of my favorite like memories are just like sitting on the couch playing Smash with my buddies, and like or like playing Rock Band and doing your drum solo or whatever. I don't play a whole lot of online games actually, just because like maybe it's because like most of my friends aren't into the same kind of games that I am, and like to play like online Smash with someone is usually awful because it lags and it's just junky. So yeah, I would take like same room gameplay multiplayer all the time, every time.
Yeah, I agree, but I have a different reason. I feel like if you can't push somebody and try and jostle the controller to mess them up, like you're not trying hard enough.
Yeah, no kidding. Pull the old like eye in front or hand in front of their eyes, like, yep. Oh, you can't see now. Yeah, that was a good move of mine that I used to use all the time.
There was also something about trying to focus on your quarter of the screen, depending on, like, especially, like, I remember in college, we had an N64 that, for some reason, the game of choice for our crew was Cruisin' World.
Oh, yeah, and that's a classic.
And just trying to not... I know it's just it's not even like a racing simulation, right? It's just a racing game, but just trying to focus on your quarter of the screen and not trying to see where your friend is or like what flips he's doing or whatever. Like that was a level of concentration that I feel like people who have never played split screen games don't appreciate.
Yeah, well, it's also kind of like I remember playing GoldenEye multiplayer, and you're in temple and you're just like, oh, this sumbitch has proximity mines, like where is he going? So you'd watch his screen and you're just like, you can kind of see where your buddy's throwing the proxy mines. You're like, okay, don't go down that hole or whatever, right? So it was also kind of like an extra added element of strategy. I mean, I'm not going to say that I think that like split screen is better than playing your screen and like whatever. Like online certainly has its conveniences, but it was definitely fun to do that and just kind of mess around with your friends.
The idea of yelling, "Are you camping?" to somebody through a headset versus "I can see you. You haven't moved in 5 minutes" is
classic camp spot. Someone in the bathroom upstairs in facility in GoldenEye for the N64.
Man, I will guiltily say I played GoldenEye, but then I went on and played every single one of those other Bond games. Every single one.
Did you?
In fact, I may still have all of them. And as weird as it is, Agent Under Fire might have been one of the best of all of them if you discount the From Russia with Love remake, which was good, but if you've watched the movie enough, you don't even need to be good at the game.
Right. Yeah, I never played any of the other Bond games. I remember actually like there was a Bond game that was called I think it was based off of Tomorrow Never Dies, and that was on PlayStation. And at the time, I was just like, "Oh, this sucks! Like, I can't play the sequel to GoldenEye," not realizing that it like didn't have anything to do with GoldenEye other than just being James Bond. But yeah, I actually really, really loved Perfect Dark, which was kind of the spiritual sequel to GoldenEye. It was made by the same developer, kind of the same everything, but just an original story. I sunk like a stupid amount of hours into that game as a kid.
So I'm sure you can answer this, and I don't want the actual number, but like top 3 games you've sunken time into. By time, you know what I mean? Like I can tell you,
time.
For me, it's probably Quake, Diablo, and then maybe I don't know what the third one would be, actually. And that's just because I keep replaying them over and over and over and over. So I know that the hours are just up there astronomically. But do you know, I'm not asking for time, but just taking a guess at like what is up there for you.
I think that there's two sets of answers. So one is like kind of multiplayer. Like time-wise, I could almost for sure say that Smash Bros. Brawl for the Wii would be a contender because we played it every day for like a year.
Who's your go-to character?
Oh, dude, Marth, Ness, Falco, Lucas. Actually, Lucas was a good one of mine. Rock Band 2 for Wii as well was another one that's up there for multiplayer. And maybe what else did we play a lot of? Definitely a lot of Smash, definitely a lot of Rock Band. Maybe those are my top two multiplayer. Top single player, I would say Perfect Dark that would have to be up there. Breath of the Wild is a contender for sure. I think I have like 400 or some hours into that, which actually is nothing because there's some people with like 2,000 hours into that game, so that is pretty crazy.
Now is that are those hours one playthrough or
I've done
multiple?
2.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, I did 2, but my first playthrough was about 300 hours because I went and did everything right, and then the second one I actually completed not that long ago. We're kind of getting ready for some Breath of the Wild themed episodes on the Champions Cast, so I was like, well, I better play Breath of the Wild and get refamiliarized, right? So, that would be one, and probably Super Metroid would be up there, or Ocarina of Time actually would be up there. I play that game at least a couple times a year, especially for the last couple of years at the Zelda Dungeon Marathon. I've been playing that, so yeah, those would probably be. There's a top 5 instead of a top 3.
No, it's multiplayer. I mean, look, there is a downside to gaming, and it hasn't really moved into console games yet. And I say yet because I feel like we're on the cusp of it. A friend of mine and I got addicted to a mobile game, and when I say addicted, I mean we actually spent money on a mobile game, which, by the way, I know there are developers out there that make a living off of this stuff, but you should never spend money on a mobile game. So we got burned because we spent money on this game. I'll call it out. Futurama Worlds of Tomorrow. Because we were huge Futurama fans. So yeah. And then, it went belly up and that was that. And then that became the model for everything. So like I got back into playing Magic through Magic Arena, and it's like, no, I learned my lesson. I'm not spending any money on this. And now I see friends playing Fortnite and Rocket League, and it's like there's these passes, and it's like I know where this is. I know what this leads to. Do you enjoy that model? Because obviously you can't be in gaming and ignore the fact that is now one of the business models.
Oh yeah, no, it's horrible. It's horrible. I think that it's already in console games. Actually, to be honest, like a couple of years ago, EA Sports came out with what was it, Star Wars Battlefront or Battlefront 2 or something like that, and the whole game was one big loot box where like if you paid extra, you could unlock all the best stuff, or like you could level up your character faster, etc., etc. And like everyone shit on it because it was so obvious and so glaring that this is it was a money grab. So no, I mean I think that's horrible. That stuff it doesn't help anyone. It's not good. You could make a good Star Wars game and it'll sell, which they did last year. But yeah, I mean it's like the whole pay to win or loot box thing. I think is really silly. I think that there can be a way to do free to play games. Because free-to-play games that offer you in-game purchases, I don't think those are inherently bad, but it's how the developers choose to, like what they choose to put your money towards. So like, I remember when Pokemon Go came out, I was like, I'm not spending money on this. Like, I'll play it, sure, but I'm not gonna spend money on it. And then eventually, I was like, you know what? I've been playing for like 6 hours with my buddies tonight. I'm gonna spend $20 because if I'm not spending $20 on this, we'd probably be at a bar doing whatever.
Sure.
So I remember spending money on that. But like, the thing about that, and maybe the weird point I'm making, is like, when you spend money in a game like that, it doesn't give you Pokemon. It gives you like Pokeballs, which helps you catch them, but it doesn't hand them to you on a silver platter. So like, you still have to work for it. And I don't mean to sound like I'm defending Nintendo here, but it's like, it's kind of how you use those microtransactions and like what you use them for. Because like, if it's literally a model where it's like, if you pay me money, we give you, like, for example, if Pokemon Go is like, if you pay $10, you get the really rare Pokemon Dragonite, and if you pay $8, you get the really rare Pokemon Venusaur. You know what I mean? Like, that sucks, I think. Whereas like, there is a way to do that, and I understand that a lot of developers make, that's how they make their money, by offering in-game purchases. But I always think that it should be like superficial stuff. Like, let's take Fortnite, for example. Like, if you are playing Fortnite and you want to pay to unlock like a cool like custom suit for your dude, or like custom stuff for your base, like aesthetic kind of stuff, sure. I think, like, why not? But yeah, like, if you're paying, $20 and then you can unlock more like better weaponry or like something like that, I think that's ugly. I mean, on the whole, no, I don't really care for that at all. I think like, say, I'm probably just a Nintendo apologist, but like, say what you will about them, but like, they charge you your $79.99 Canadian for the game, and you get the game. There's nothing else in there. You have it, and that's it. And unfortunately, a lot of games don't do that.
There's an argument to be made, especially now, because we're in uncharted streaming territory, and we don't know what, like, that having the physical game is important. And maybe now more than ever, because like, I expect that Netflix isn't going anywhere, and Amazon Prime and Hulu and all the rest, and HBO Max are not going anywhere. And by the same token, I expect that Nintendo and Sony and Microsoft will be around as well. But if I'm not connected to the internet, I can still play a game if I own the physical disc. And I can play more games because I'm not limited by the space that I have on my console. And the same thing goes for movies, and, owning, whether it's vinyl's resurgence or a CD for music. We don't know anything about digital ownership. And I know that that's kind of a separate conversation, but we do not know anything about it. So like, I applaud you for going back and replenishing your GameCube collection, because there might be a way, and it's probably not that far off, where Nintendo will allow you a digital download for some of those GameCube games. But do you really own it? I don't know. Like, it's basically you're paying for access. But if you owned the game, if you own the disc, that's something. And I feel like it gets lost in the shuffle on some of these things.
Yeah, I mean, that's, you're right. That's the future of games. You see it with Xbox and Microsoft already with Game Pass, which is basically like Netflix for video games. You pay your monthly fee and you get access to all these titles, and that's great. But yeah, I buy physical every single time. I actually am part of a collector groups that I like to collect, like, just old cartridges, old games, stuff like that. So yeah, whenever possible, I will always buy physical. And like, there is great arguments to like publishers making their titles available digital only, which is basically like, it cuts the cost in half for the consumer, which is great. And I wouldn't necessarily discourage anybody from buying like digital, but like you said, it's just like, it's nice to know that, like, if you're, I don't know, if your Switch breaks and something happens to it, and maybe you didn't have a Nintendo Online membership, or it's not backed up, or your account is compromised or something. I don't know. I just feel safer having that little cartridge, right? And I'll usually pay like double, unfortunately, is usually the cost of what a physical cartridge is. But I'll usually pay double to get a game from like a video game publisher like Limited Run Games or Super Rare Games or something like that, which are actually, they're pretty cool operations. That's basically their mission, is to make sure that like stuff is preserved in a physical form.
As far as like classic consoles, what do you have and how many? Because like I just imagine somewhere you have a closet with like 4 NESs.
Well, I can show you this. I don't think that anyone listening to this is going to be able to see, but if you look, I got my webcam right now.
Yep.
Right above me is an NES.
Yep.
There's an SNES with a copy of Super Metroid in it. There's a green Nintendo 64 with Ocarina of Time in it, and there is a PlayStation 2 and a Super Game Boy, which was a cool little cartridge thing for the Super Nintendo. So those are at my desk downstairs. Upstairs there is let's see. Upstairs there's a PlayStation 4, there's a Xbox 360 and an Xbox One, there's a Nintendo Switch, there's a Nintendo Wii, there's a GameCube, there's a Wii U, there's a 3DS, there's a DS, there's the SNES Mini Classic, there's the NES Mini Classic, and I think that's it. I think that there's a lot of video game stuff. Yeah.
All right. Let me ask you this: if you came across another NES, would you buy it?
Probably not.
Okay.
I don't like. I'm not a crazy collector like that. Like I have a buddy he has like 10 NESs or whatever, and he just has them because I don't know why. I don't know why he has 10 NESs. I can't make up a reason, but he has them. But I have one, so that's probably good enough for me.
Yeah, I have a few cartridges somewhere around here of like games I remember, but I don't have an NES. Like it's just like I there's a classic in my house. My partner, she bought it, and we played it a little bit, and that was it. Like I like the idea. I guess I like the idea of the NES Classic, but it probably wasn't worth the purchase because we played it twice. Like,
yeah, definitely. I'm with you actually. I think the SNES Classic for me was one that I was a lot more excited about, but yeah, the NES Classic, I kind of just wanted it as like a collectible actually.
Yeah.
Rather than like to play the games, because I think I played Zelda 2 for like an hour, and I was like, I am done. Like, I'm not playing this anymore. Like, that's enough. And the controllers that they gave you had like a 3-foot cord, which also was ridiculous.
Yeah,
but,
yeah. I will say, I will give them a props for the 3-foot cord, because we're not playing on 16-inch CRT televisions anymore. And you don't want to be that close to your 42-inch television, whatever it is, right? Like,
yeah, it was horrible.
Remember, you and I are supposed to be blind because we sat as close to the TV playing video games as possible.
I will tell you for sure, dude, that I am blind. I'm wearing contacts right now.
Okay.
My eyesight is awful.
I mean, I'm
awful.
I'm wearing glasses, but I've stared at a computer screen for the better part of the last 30 years.
Yeah, well, you got me there. Me too.
Like, or TV, I guess. You know, I mean, this is a good question for you. What do you do to unplug?
How about just in general?
Do
or
you unplug?
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't, to be honest, like, to put that in context of, like, what do I do to unplug? Like, what I think of is, like, you've had kind of a rough day, you just want to go home and, like, chill out. Like, video games is my thing to just kind of, like, relax and wind down or whatever. I mean, like, now that I'm older and, you know, working, it's you don't get as much time to play video games, so by definition, you're not doing that for a whole lot of time. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, like, as most of the time, like when I when I get home, unless I have like work to do on the computer specifically, like it ain't open. Like I'm just shutting it down, and like whoever else can wait. If it's really important, they can direct message me and I'll try and get back to them. But like, yeah, it's usually closed when I get home, and I feel like it's a different thing to unplug from like staring at a computer than it is for a video game. So like, it sounds stupid, but like I sometimes play video games to like unplug, because like during the day I work with like WordPress and other site stuff most of the day. And by the end of that, I'm like, dude, I just want to play some Super Mario or something like that, right? Like,
I want pixels that will move and not because I scrolled. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, that's fine. I in the last few years, I've made a concerted effort to like read more physical books to kind of cut down on the screen time. But I get the idea. Like, I've been slightly addicted to Minecraft, although I'm coming out of it. I am. I was doing some massive builds that aren't even done, that I'm like, yeah, I'm all right. Because I have that, I'm not going to say addictive personality, but like I can get addicted to a video game, like, and it happens to be Minecraft now, but like go back a few years and it was something else, and go back a few years before then and it was, what was the big one for me? Like not too long. Oh, Dragon Quest 8. I think I was huge into that one. And I was like, well, I got to collect all the monsters. Like I just have to collect all the monsters. So like I have those moments, but like I'm with you. Like you spend time, especially in the back end, staring at any kind of CMS or CRM, and all of a sudden all you want to do is shoot things and kill stuff. That's
I'm kind of on the same page as you, where like I'll sink. Let's use Breath of the Wild as an example. I mean, I'll sink like 400 hours into that game, and I love it, and like I'm like so into it, like yeah, I mean, like borderline addicted to that game. But I never got into like the games that were kind of like they just continued, because like for me at least. Like I had a bunch of buddies back in the day that were like really big into World of Warcraft and stuff like that, and StarCraft, and even I think they made a Star Wars game, The New Republic or something like that.
Yep.
Where it was like kind of an online MMO, and those ones never really kind of were my jam, because like I can sink like 400 hours into a game, but it has to have a definitive start and end. So like when I hit the end, I'm like, okay, I'm done. Which is why I'm not like super into games like that, or even like Animal Crossing, which is like a massive game, today. Or massive series today.
I graduated from college in 2004, but when Animal Crossing, the first one, came out and hit that campus, like that was crack. No one left their room. There were so many dorm rooms with multiple game cubes and multiple TVs, because roommates didn't want to wait for the other one. So I was not going to buy another console just to get addicted again. Like, I know what that game can do to you.
Yeah. I mean, like, look at Animal Crossing New Horizons, man. That's the game of our times right now. And it's kind of like the perfect thing that we were talking about, like way back at the beginning. Like, that's the escape from
everything,
everything. So it's a thing. I mean, like some people are, some people are pretty intense into that and can be to their detriment, which is too bad.
Yeah, I think everybody, you find that thing, like in that moment, like go back on campus for me in like 2003 or whatever. Like that was all we wanted to do. In hindsight, I can be like, oh no, we were absolutely addicted.
Yeah, I mean, you nailed it. And those, luckily, like I said, like for me, like those games don't really kind of appeal to me, because it's like, I need to have a start and I need to have an end, and there needs to be a purpose to what I'm doing. And if there is, then great, I'm in. But those ones never really hooked me, and I think that's why, is this because like if you can't see the end goal, I'm just kind of like, maybe I can like just not do this.
Just like you can have your favorite comfort food, classic album, or go-to movie, you can totally have a comfort video game, or even more than one. But video games tend to get more of a bad rap than other forms of media do. To me, there's no difference between a passive medium like putting on a movie and an active one like fortifying your Minecraft stronghold or losing to a boss on purpose in Skies of Arcadia. Andy and I discussed the positives of gaming, but as is the case with our mutual friend Diamond Dave, those positives will differ from person to person. Are you up to the challenge? Do you want to be a hero? Do you want to just shoot things? Or are you just looking for an experience that lets you hang out with friends? The idea of gaming has changed. Years ago, it meant sitting on the floor close to your family or friends, only separated by the cords of your controllers or by avoiding sitting on that weird spot on the carpet. And, of course, you couldn't sit too close to the television. That kind of gaming isn't gone, it's just changed and gotten its own term. They call it couch co-op today. If you can believe it, it's what the kids are saying. But that doesn't change the fact that the game remains as a means to escape. You might not find your escape from a game. Perhaps you do get it from a book, a movie, an album. But if you can understand the escape you get from any of those, then you can understand what people who escape with games know. Sometimes it's better to get out of your own head and experience something out of this world or just something different. What are your comfort games? And for that matter, what are your comfort movies, comfort albums, comfort books? I'm all in on all formats, and you should be too. Also, thanks for choosing podcasts as a way to escape. And as always, thanks for listening to The Palmer Files, episode 31. As a reminder, all links are available in the show notes, and now for the official business. The Palmer Files releases every 2 weeks on Tuesdays. If you're still listening, I encourage you to join the discussion. You can tweet me at Age of Palmer, the show at The Palmer Files, and Andy at Spiteri316. That's Spiteri 316. You can hear more of him on the Champions Cast, Omega Metroid, and Virtual Theater on your podcast app of choice. And, check out ZeldaDungeon.net for all your Zelda needs. Email can be sent to the show at thepalmerfiles@gmail.com if you have any feedback on this or any previous episode, or if there's a topic or guest you'd like me to consider. All right, Andy, do you have one final question for me?
I do. Did our mutual friend, Diamond Dave Maier, ever force you or ask you to listen to our podcast from way back in the day, The Cool Story Show? And if he did, what did you think of that bullshit?
He did not, actually. And I haven't, and I will tell you why. It's not because I don't want to. It's actually more in line with the fact that the show that brought Dave and I together was 7 Days a Geek. And I went back and did and I got into 7 Days a Geek around episode 90. And I did the entire back catalog dive. And then I found out that there was a show that existed before that called TLPS, and I did that dive of like 70 some episodes. And at that point, I vowed I was never going backwards into a show like that ever again. I was just going to listen to new things. And Dave had talked about the Cool Story Show.
Oh God.
But he only ever brought it up in the context of like how he got to Podcasts Without Borders.
Right.
And I do know, and this is where it's gone from my memory, I remember Dave talking about it on an episode of the Podcast Digest where he was found because of the Cool Story Show. And I think he's one of the few people that have been on that show like 5 times because Dave came on once for each podcast he had.
Yeah. I remember actually him and I met Dan from the Podcast Digest in like 2014. And yeah, he originally asked all 4 of us to come on the show, but only Dave and I could make it for whatever reason. And I remember Dan had like this really deep, manly voice, and I felt so intimidated by him. I was just like, oh my God, this guy is like legitimate. I'm just some doofus with like a microphone in my laptop here. What am I doing? But yeah, the Cool Story Show was absolutely horrible, but I'm glad that it kind of got Dave and myself into this podcasting world. But it's so cringy to look back from where you started.
Look, I as the Cliff Notes version of this, I started as a proxy caster. I started as a guest on everyone's show and didn't want to launch my own. Mainly because I didn't know what this show would be at the time, and it was so much fun to just show up and talk on other people's shows and never have to worry about like promotion or anything, like editing.
Yeah.
But I will tell you, the first show I was ever on was an episode of The Stranger Conversations with Grant Markham, and I will tell you that it took me look, that was like a 90-minute or a 2-hour episode. Like those episodes were long. It takes me less time to edit completely and maybe even record these episodes that I'm doing now than it took me to listen back to that first episode. Because I talked to Grant, and then he released it, and I think I listened to it in like 10 or 15 minute increments, followed by like an hour of not listening to it because I was like, I don't want to listen to my voice. Like, just like,
I know, right?
So that was the cringeworthy thing. Like, I don't even know what I said because it was such a, like, it was a conversation, but I listened to it so disjointed that it just, but now, it's not a problem, but you grow and but yeah, no, thank God that doesn't exist anymore. So no one can go back and find that. I do have a copy. I'm just saying.
I think that our stuff. Oh God, I don't even know if I should say this. I think it's still on YouTube. It's super. It's bad. It's bad stuff. If you want to see like a bunch of losers sing "Kiss from a Rose" at the top of their lungs, or like talk about their worst dates, I'm sure that it might be on YouTube somewhere. But I would not, in good conscience, recommend anybody go and find that. But yeah, so that was my question to see. If you'd ever told you about our humble beginnings.
I mean, I know about the beginnings.
Dave did the right thing and probably didn't.
I mean, I know about the beginnings, but he never was like, listen, you have to listen. But Dave's always good about moving on to the next thing, maybe even too quickly. Yes. So there's never time to go back and listen to the old stuff. There's always a new thing.
Yes, I love that. I love that you said that. Oh, yes.